Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Happy to have you here today. We're going to be talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Human Rights Day is December 10th, which is tomorrow. And so we will be looking through that and talking a little bit about the history of the Declaration. But before we do that, I would like to thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which sponsors Something to Talk About. In the nonprofit world, we are very grateful to folks who offer us support, and Fieldstone, which has independent and assisted living and a vibrant memory care community up on Rolling Bay, has been sponsoring this program for a while now. We appreciate it. They also have day stay and respite care programs, and if you'd like to take a tour or learn more, the phone number you can call, which I'll give you in just a second, or you can look at their website at fieldstonecommunities.com. Call Celia or Jamie. The number is 206-594-1010, 206-594-1010. Also, we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, who have lived on the waters of the Salish Sea since time immemorial. And we are grateful for their hospitality, and we are learning from them about being better stewards of these lands and waters. I want to thank you all for joining today, and a special thank you, as usual, to Anne Lovejoy, who does such a great job of helping us organize some of these programs around inclusion and diversity. And the Declaration of Human Rights is definitely a commitment to the value of diversity and inclusion. So it's a perfect topic for us, as it is pretty much every year we get together to talk about it.
I can remember reading these rights at City Hall a time or two, and at Eagle Harbor Church a time or two, and out in in various parks and things like that. I just feel like it's something that's important to remind ourselves about, but especially right now when the whole world is in a lot of disarray and human rights are not really necessarily seeming to be of great importance to everybody. I wanted to start by reading a little bit about Eleanor Roosevelt, who most people probably know that she really had a very formative role in having the United Nations create the universal human rights, but also to bring together a number of countries that really weren't that interested, and creating an environment, a kind of a culture that was awakening for a lot of people. And initially, she had been asked to be appointed to the United Nations by Harry Truman, but she said she didn't think she was qualified. But later she called him back and said she did want to. She'd been asked already to run for the United States Senate, become the Secretary of Labor, or head several universities. And she didn't want to do those things. She wanted to speak for herself after all the years of Franklin Roosevelt's public service, and assured everyone who approached her that my voice would not be silent. She didn't sit on the sidelines as others built the United Nations. She had witnessed herself the trauma that war and extreme deprivation inflicted upon the world. And she had long championed international organizations dedicated to peace, like the League of Nations, the World Court, the International Committee for the Cause and Cure of War. And what happened to that? I'm curious. And she shared Franklin Roosevelt's vision for the United Nations. But she visited a lot of hospitals and battlefields during the Second World War, and they really haunted her. She prayed, "Dear Lord, lest I continue my complacent way, help me to remember that somewhere, somehow out there, a person died for me today. And as long as there be war, I must ask myself, am I worth dying for?" Whoa. Her male delegation colleagues were distressed at her appointment because they thought if she served on the United Nations Committee for Social, Humanitarian, and Cultural Concerns, she would work on issues they considered inconsequential, because they focused on structuring the Security Council and regulating atomic weapons. She wanted to focus on human rights. No one anticipated how her stature would increase as she argued against the forced repatriation of 60 million displaced people. No one foresaw how the United Nations debates on the Geneva Conventions, atomic energy, arms control, the proposed United Nations Peace Force, the creation of Israel, the implementation of apartheid, The demise of colonialism and women's rights would compel her to act, and no one predicted she would be unanimously elected to chair the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. As she wrote to her dear friend, against all the odds, the women inch forward, but I am rather too old to be carrying on the fight. I think that's so interesting because she was about the same age as many of us, right? And look how she managed to carry on the fight, carry on the work. Yeah, that's one of the number of articles that I put in the chat if you want to read. There's a lovely one too about um, the women who shaped the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the UN website, because Eleanor Roosevelt does get a lot of credit, but there were quite a few other women who were extremely important in the same effort who are maybe lesser acknowledged. And so that's a wonderful little piece of extra reading for us later on. I also kind of wanted to read this introduction, which is from the human rights booklet that I had sent out before, that is much more timely, I could say. It was, I'm trying to find the date, sorry. Zaid Rad Al Hussein, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, put out this year. And it says, in perhaps the most resonant and beautiful words of any international agreement, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. The commitments made by all states in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are in themselves a mighty achievement, discrediting the tyranny, discrimination, and contempt for human beings that have marked human history. The Universal Declaration promises to all the economic, social, political, cultural, and civic rights that underpin a life free from want and fear. They are not a reward for good behavior. They are not country specific or particular to a certain era or social group. Sorry, I keep losing this. They are the inalienable entitlements of all people at all times and in all places, people of every color, from every race and ethnic group, whether or not, sorry, I seem to be having, whether or not they're disabled, citizens, or migrants, no matter their sex, their class, their caste, their creed, their age, or sexual orientation. Human rights abuses did not end when the Universal Declaration was adopted, but since then, countless people have gathered and gained greater freedom. Violations have been prevented, independence and autonomy have been attained in some places at some times. Many people, though not all, have been able to secure freedom from torture, unjustified imprisonment, summary execution, enforced disappearance, persecution, and unjust discrimination, as well as fair access to education, economic opportunities, and adequate resources in healthcare. They have obtained justice for wrongs and national and international protection for their rights through the strong architecture of the international human rights legal system. The power of the Universal Declaration is the power of ideas to change the world. It inspires us to continue working to ensure that all people can gain freedom, equality, and dignity. Rita, I think you said you had a copy of the.
Let's see, I'm just looking at the, oops. We're having these challenges here. Let's see. I have it up to share. I can just get the Zoom meeting here. There's the Universal Declaration, starting with the preamble.
That doesn't seem readable on my screen.
See this, whereas?
I can read it. I can read it.
Okay, do you want to read it, Mike?
So this is the Universal Declaration. And if you search for Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you will find it. And I'm happy to help read too. So Mike, you want to start?
Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind and the advent of the world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. You want to alternate the whereases?
Sure. I'll read a couple. Whereas it is essential, if man or woman is not compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. Whereas it is essential to promote the development of friendly relations between nations, whereas the peoples of the United Nations have, in the Charter, reaffirmed their faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and in the equal rights of men and women, and have determined to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom.
Whereas member states have pledged themselves to achieve, in cooperation with the United Nations, the promotion of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Whereas a common understanding of these rights and freedoms is of the greatest importance for the full realization of this pledge. Now, therefore,
The General Assembly proclaims this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society keeping this declaration constantly in mind shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance, both among the peoples of member states themselves and among the peoples of territories under their jurisdiction. So
Thank you.
we now have a series of articles.
Yeah, Julia, actually, I sent out a link with the reminder to everybody. Julia had very thoughtfully typed out a list of these, so some of you may have that. But Julia, do you want to start us off by reading the first one? You're muted.
Yep.
Oh, thanks.
Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of humanhood.
There you go. Rita, how about the second one?
I can't hear her.
Rita, you're muted.
That's pretty unusual for me. Everyone is entitled to all rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty.
Article 3, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Who wants to read Article 4? Fern? Go ahead, Fern.
One shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms.
Thank you, Francis. Fern, do you want to do the next one?
No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment.
Sheila.
Everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law.
How about Marion? Marion is muted.
Muted.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it to you. Well, this weekend.
Uh-oh. How about Kristen?
And we're on Article 7. All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination.
Anybody has it? Julia, do you want to do another
Sure,
one?
I'll start again. Article 8, everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him or her by the Constitution or by law.
Article 9.
I'll read that.
Thanks,
No.
Rita.
No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile.
Marion, how about 10?
Everyone is entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal in the determination of his rights and obligations of any criminal charge against him or her.
Sheila, do you want to do 11?
Okay. Number 1, everyone charged with a penal offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law in a public trial at which he or she has had all the guarantees necessary for his or her defense. Number 2, no one shall be held guilty of any penal offense on account of any act or omission which did not constitute a penal offense under national or international law at the time when it was committed, nor shall a heavier penalty be imposed than the one that was applicable at the time the penal offense was committed.
Mike, how about 12?
Article 12, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of law against such interference or attacks.
Fern, do you want to do 13?
Article 13, number 1, everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. Number 2, everyone has the right to leave any country, including his or her own, and to return to their country.
Reed, how about 14?
14. 1, everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. And 2, this right may not be invoked in the case of prosecutions genuinely arising from non-political crimes or from acts contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations.
Francis.
Article 15, subparagraph 1, everyone has the right to a nationality. Number 2, no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality or denied the right to change his nationality.
Kristen, will you do 16?
Article 16, people of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and to found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage, during marriage, and at its dissolution. Number 2, marriage shall be entered into only with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. Number 3, the family is the natural and fundamental group of unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state.
Interesting.
Mike?
Article 17, everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. Number 2, no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property or her property.
How about Fern?
Article 18, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his or her religion or belief
and freedom either alone or in community with others and in public or private to manifest his or her religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance.
Wow.
Yeah. Rita?
Number 19, Article 19. Everyone has the right of freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers.
Article 20.
Mhm.
Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceable assembly and association. 2. No one may be compelled to belong to an association. Read.
21. 1. Everyone has the right to take part in the government of his or her country directly or through freely chosen representatives. Everyone has the right of equal access to public service in their country. And 3. The will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. This will shall be expressed in periodic and genuine elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage, and shall be held by secret vote or by equivalent free voting procedures.
Marion.
Article 22. Everyone, as a member of society, has the right to social security and is entitled to realization through national effort and international cooperation, and in accordance with the organization and resources of each state, of the economic, social, and cultural rights indispensable for his dignity and the free development of his or her personality.
Thank you. Julia.
23. Number 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, and to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. 2, everyone without any discrimination has the right to equal pay for equal work. 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for themselves and their family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented if necessary by other means of social protection. 4, everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of their interests.
Mike.
Article 24. Everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitations of working hours and periodic holidays with pay.
Kristen.
Article number 25. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of themselves and their family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond their control. Number 2, motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection.
Sheila, I believe this one is one you wanted specifically.
Yeah, thank you. 1, everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. 2, education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship amongst all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. 3, parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children.
27, Marion.
Article 27, Part 1. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. 2. Everyone has the right to the protection of the moral and material interests resulting from any scientific, literary, or artistic production of which he or she is the author.
28, Julia.
28, everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration can be fully realized.
Mike.
Article
I'm
29
not here.
and number 1. Everyone has duties to the community in which alone the free and full development of his or her personality is possible. Number 2, in the exercise of his or her rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others and of meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. 3, these rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations.
Francis.
Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth herein.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, Anne.
I'm just curious about reading these through. Do they, I noticed quite a few of us sort of saying her, that there's still some updating to do. There's still some work to do. The universality and the ironic part about this, of course, is that Eleanor Roosevelt worked extremely hard to get women's rights included against a great deal of controversy and back pressure. And yet, it's not universal at all, right? We still have a long way to go.
For sure, but you can hear that in the call and requirement for equal pay for equal work,
Yes.
for protections for motherhood or the rearing of children, that might not have been there if not for her work.
Right? The high dream prevails, but it's still a dream.
Yes.
Anybody got a thought they want to share?
Well, I found it very interesting that there's no, and there can't be, I suppose, any mention of how these rights will be enforced. I mean, they're there. It's an extraordinary document, but of course, it's as good as the intention and the purpose and the will of people to enforce it. And our country is as guilty as many others of abusing those rights.
I found something at the art museum that was on one of the artists' books that they had made, and it's out of glass. And it, to me, it just really seems like it kind of fits this. It says the true alchemists do not change lead into gold. They change the world into words. So to me, that just, I think the words, the more people can talk together and come together and listen and really say what's on their heart, we can change the world. Truly, to me that just hit me like that. I don't know if it's anybody else, but I love that.
One thing that struck me was reading some of them, such as having to do with health and education, as to how it sounds really good that those rights are available to everybody, but in practice, there's so many other considerations that keep people from having the access to health and education, for two things.
Very true. Mike, I think you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say that after years of volunteering for Amnesty International and stuff, I've been exposed to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights a lot. And I always am blown away by how comprehensive it is in many respects. You know, it may need tweaking and updating here and there, but it's just amazing. I mean, it's a revolutionary document.
Mhm.
If you could ever get close to accomplishing this, you know, I just read the thing about everybody's entitled to free education. And I know I'm subsidizing a student in Kenya to pay their school fees. And without that money, they would not get education. So, yeah, we need to keep working on this.
I think that's so true, Mike, and it really is like the umbrella to the whole conversation about words and actions together, and the fact that this needs constant. I mean, we're doing everybody a disservice if we think that we've got a thing that's an ironclad statement that's just going to work forever. Obviously, the language needs updating, but everybody needs to keep actually working toward it.
Kind of like the Civil Rights
Right.
Act,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Marion.
I just want to say one thing, because I'm working hard on environmental issues,
Mhm.
and that I think that it would be nice to include some of the rights of nature in this document. That you know, an example that probably some of you have seen, the portion of the Snohomish River has recently been voted by the community to have its own rights, and therefore keeping it, you know, free from pollution or free from just, you know, so many things that are also a privilege for us.
And that's been happening in some South and Central American countries
Mhm.
as well, that some of the rivers have been granted. In Brazil, I think in Peru,
Yes,
you know,
in New Zealand, yes.
yeah, it's starting to happen.
Yeah.
But again, it requires implementation.
Yes. That's a very important point that Francis mentioned.
But the bubbling up, like that we are becoming more aware nationally, internationally, that, you know, if nature doesn't have rights, humans are doomed. I mean, most of us like to breathe, right? So thinking about, you know, the rights of trees, the rights of water and air, those things are slow to coming, but they're definitely on the way. Kristen.
I just wanted to confess that I did a quick Google search while we were talking about this, and AI, to its credit, comes up with a whole list of additional items to add to this, including environmental rights, access to justice, intersectionality. And I think that how these kinds of things are co-related. I think obviously accessibility, gender related issues, all those things, they need, I mean, when we talk about racism as a core piece of what we need to grapple with in terms of equity and how that relates to ageism and economic disadvantages and inaccessibility and all of these other things, we're really talking about the same. There are core issues that are affecting everything else.
Francis.
And I think it's important, and we've made a big step forward in how we acknowledge that we're living on tribal land. But I think it's important to be open to learning from them, because they do give rights to inanimate objects, objects like rivers and lakes and trees, but also, of course, the animals and how they thank the salmon before they eat it. And I think we have so much to learn from the First Peoples, and I think we're making some small steps forward in that regard, but it's going to take a while.
Well, if you think about this document was really put together about 80 years ago, and how much our worldview has changed in our lifetimes and is still changing. And when I think about my kids and my grandkids and look at their worldviews, which are vastly bigger than mine in many ways, I think, yeah, it it takes a lot of traction to move the world, but I feel like we are moving in hopeful directions for the most part. And but of course, when that happens, there's the pushback, right? So we're experiencing both those things. Read.
You mentioned that, and I think I cannot imagine this document being crafted by those parties today. It's disappointing, but I just really, right now in the world, I just don't see that those kinds of visions that Eleanor Roosevelt was and others were working hard to realize. They depended on a shared idealism, which had blinders for sure, but it seemed like there was a critical mass of people who were interested in trying to articulate these things. Didn't get full sign on. Obviously, there's a lot of loopholes in the United Nations to allow governments to not participate in things that they think they don't want to. But it's just amazing, as Mike was saying earlier, that this document, as fulsome as it is, exists and was ratified.
And by so many of the countries that were involved, didn't really share these values. It took a lot of wrangling. And yeah, it might or might not happen today, because today you could also find like-minded people from every one of these countries who would love to support this. And that's part of the thing, isn't it? It's like we are so complex as humans that we encompass every side of every issue. But this is really a document to hold dear. I feel like it's something, that part about Eleanor Roosevelt saying, if people are dying for me, am I worth dying for? I thought, wow, I don't personally want anyone to die for me, but I would love for a bunch of people to live for each other.
I think it's also needs expanding to consider space. I'm concerned about Elon Musk's idea to take over, have the power there. And, I wish we could get ahead of those feelings with something reasonable to have some rights for the whole super space.
We're definitely in for a rough ride.
We are in for a rough ride, and I think when I look at things, I think we are in for a rough ride for the next 4 years, but I think there's going to come a point where there are going to be some young people who say, no, this is not how we're going to live. And I am just praying every day that they come up, and that they will come up and say no, and then stuff will start to change, and it's going to be slow, but I feel like that's going to happen. I have that hope for all of us. I truly do. I feel that I have the hope for all of us, that this country will go through some very dramatic things, but that it will start to change. And hopefully I'm here to see it.
Frances, did you want to say something?
I was adjusting, again, trying to get comfortable, but to tag on to that, talking about young people saying no, I have a big concern that Trump and his friends are looking at education and doing all they can to limit free thinking, analytical thinking. And that was Hitler's plan, and that was his attack. He won the young people over. They even tattled on their parents, on their neighbors. And the way this administration, or the future beginning in January, the way they're talking about education, let alone the person that Trump wants to put in charge of education, scares the living daylights out of me. And I really hope that parents take some responsibility and look at what the kids are learning and make some decisions as about to what, not banning books. That's not the answer. I don't know what the answer is, except that we need to make sure that our children are getting the full story and that they're not being brainwashed, which is what Trump and friends accuse the Democrats of doing. In Texas, they accused the progressives of brainwashing kids, and they lost by one vote a movement to eliminate critical thinking in the schools. They lost that by one vote, and that's scary to me. My granddaughter is an administrator in the education system in Texas, and I worry for her because she's written some pretty firm and candid critiques of what's going on. And I'm afraid they're going to start looking at these teachers who are trying to do a good job and ban them as well as the books. It's scary when you see, if you read, and that's the thing, so many people don't know the history, don't bother to educate themselves about what Hitler actually did. You know, they hear about his attack on the Jews, but they don't really realize how broad target was. It went beyond the Jews. It went far beyond the Jews.
It's true. It was gay people and disabled people and gypsies, and there were lots of targeted groups at that time. But I keep thinking about Margaret Mead, who has a quote that I'm not going to do very well with, but I think she said, like, never underestimate the power of a small group of concerned citizens to change the world, because they're the only thing that ever has, or something along those lines.
Right.
And then Reed has a quote that he might want to share that has something to do with the mosquito.
It's a good one.
Oh, yes, well, and variously attributed, but the idea of that if you wonder if a small action can have a big consequence, if you've ever spent the night with a mosquito in your room, you'll know how powerful a little irritant like that can be. Yeah, I think that there's an obligation that we all have to stick up, speak up, stand behind, stand around when somebody like your daughter, Frances, is saying something or doing something to make it clear that that person is not standing alone. Even if we don't have the thing that we're going to say in the top of our head, when we hear somebody else say something we support and we know we should support, we should not be silent. That will make a huge difference, I think, because that will give other people permission to stand up too.
Yes, exactly. And the other piece is, we all know how to be annoying. So let's harness that and put it to good use. We can be the mosquitoes under the skin.
And we have to put our points forward about, like, it's not us against them or anything. That we just put our points forward, and they're the truth. And then, and sometimes we have to do that again and again. But if we can keep it so there's not a big argument, but that we're just saying, this is how I feel. and why?
You know, years ago, I was asked to write garden columns that called people out and shamed them for bad gardening stuff. And I realized very quickly I mean, I just said no, but I realized it's because I want to be for things. I don't want to be against things.
Right.
It's like I'd much rather put my energy and time and effort into what I believe in and what I want desperately for the whole planet. And that's where I want to put my energy, my time, my thought, my love, my abilities. So yeah, let's go before what we care about.
You
And
know,
I'm thinking about, you know, the native cultures that Francis talked about. I think that they didn't just give rights to a lot of the world, they gave personhood. So the rock people and the tree people and the animal people and the fish people and the air people and the water people have personhood. And in that way, there's so much more respect built right into that statement, right? So yeah, we have a lot to learn and a lot to study, and some of it's very beautiful and inspiring.
I just wanted to, oh, sorry.
I just want to say one more thing and I'll be quiet. Just remember, the airplane takes off against the wind.
There you go. Sheila, did you have something? Maybe not. Kristen, do you want to jump in?
I just wanted to loop back to what Rita and Francis were saying about young people and education, and how I know, talking to my own children who are in their 20s now, one of the things that I find really important is to help them understand that it's not just on them, but that they have people like us to learn from and lean on. And I think that there are many of us in this group who have witnessed that on Bainbridge, especially in the queer elders group, where making that learning or knowledge about what their lives were like as elders was really of importance to young people, and vice versa. And so in terms of intersectionality and the connection, I think that understanding, kind of dismantling ageism, that's huge, but helping young people understand that there are really valuable lifelines in elders, and the other direction is really great. I think young people feel very burdened by the situation that they have been left by the elders. So anything we can do to show up, continue to show up, leave it all on the dance floor, as my partner says. And Francis, I will say, after having been an arts administrator for a stretch there on Bainbridge, returning to the classroom, I am currently teaching both college-age students at Olympic College and high school students doing running start. So my youngest students are 15 years old in the college class. And I'm also teaching first and second graders in an after-school arts class. And I will say that my agenda, transparently stated, is to demonstrate why arts are a transferable skill. And it's that kind of thing, like understanding critical thinking through the arts is one thing, but that critical thinking applies to every part of, it's a way of being in the world. So I'll say I feel like a revolutionary when I go in the classroom, and I'm really proud of that. So
Good for
Yay.
good for you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Reed, we have a very short 2-3 minute video by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and I thought we could just kind of end with that, unless anybody has one more thing they want to throw in here. Take it away, Reed.
Today, as we mark Human Rights Day, I want to focus on what our rights mean. Human rights are about people. They are about you and your life, your needs and wants and fears, your hopes for the present and the future, a safe home, food and clean water, healthcare, education, decent work and a livable minimum wage, to live in peace, to be free to express your opinion. These are your human rights. They are about who we are and how we live. They are the legal commitments all states have made to serve their people. They are not abstract ideas or ideologies up for debate at an elite club. Human rights are for the single mother with 3 jobs putting her children through school. They are for the child crying for help, buried under the rubble of his home. They are for the poet imprisoned for a verse that criticized the authorities, for the pensioner with a disability in wartime, trapped in her apartment for months without end. They are for communities living on land poisoned by chemicals. They are for young people who can't afford a home and for workers left behind by globalization. They give a voice and opportunities to the excluded and forgotten. They are for each and every one of you who feels vulnerable, angry, confused, afraid, disenfranchised, and is seeking better. Human rights don't belong to any political party or to any region of the world. They belong to all of us, to every one of you. Today, there are those who are trying to discredit and discard human rights, throwing glitter in our eyes as they redefine and undermine our fundamental freedoms. This is the politics of distraction. And I understand why. Human rights are simple, powerful ideas that motivate people to stand up for themselves. So they pose a threat to autocrats, to populists, and authoritarians of all kinds. Previous generations fought and even died for human rights. The right to vote, the right to protest, the right to work, and to equal pay for women, the right to be seen, heard, and counted. Our forebears took to the streets, to parliaments, and to the courts to fight against colonialism and apartheid, discrimination, inequality, slavery, and racism. They built the international human rights system, bringing real improvements to the lives of people around the world. Our humanity is robust. When faced with the greatest obstacles, people transcend their differences and overcome. Today, at another precarious moment for our world, many of you are doing the same on climate action, on women's rights, and on peace. The full promise of human rights is still to be fulfilled. The evidence is everywhere. So I urge you to stay the course, mobilize, use your voices and votes, reach out and connect to build strong social movements that stand up for your rights and those of future generations. Call on your leaders to work for equality, justice, peace, and all your human rights. On Human Rights Day and every day, I stand with you to uphold the human rights of everyone, everywhere.